I was always excited to walk just behind Dad if he entered a party store up north. There were two reasons for that. One, it was pretty much a guarantee I was walking out of there with beef jerky and a can of Coke in hand. And two, I was always in awe of the intricate dance that would begin to unfold. You see, we don't have birds of paradise here in Michigan, but we do have fishermen that require a flash of plumage if they're going to divulge their secrets. You can't just stroll up to the counter and say, "Hey, where are they biting?" You gotta dance, baby. You gotta hop on one foot and call. You know what I mean? Dad purposely, stealthily, and quickly revealed he knew the area and had fished it previously while placing items on the counter. The person behind the counter responded in kind with appropriate head nods and all the advice needed to set us up right fishing for that weekend. Dad may be gone, but his communication tendencies live on in me, and I use them all the time when I'm considering how to be the best dad I can for little Maxine. After all, if you go out into the world seeking advice, it's best to remember most streets go two ways. Welcome to Season 2 of My Dad, I'm Dad, a podcast for anyone who's ever loved, lost, or anything in between. My name is Doug. The first 15 episodes of this show will always stand as a damn good introduction to the kind of man and father my dad was before he passed away. The show was originally meant to help my daughter get to know her Jaja and help me process my feelings my way, but I also hoped it might help anyone going through a rough time. These coming episodes still do just that, but I brought guests along for Season 2. I wanted to learn from and enjoy conversations with people that could shed light on things not written about in parenting books, or hear stories about Dad, or laugh, or shed a tear, or anything in between. But let's back it up for a minute. Now, imagine me sitting at a desk and laying out Season 1. I knew how to spin a yarn. I knew stories about Dad that could paint the picture of who he was, and still is. But I didn't know how to get a podcast out to listeners. I tapped into that Wally Dorda advice courtship ritual and took to the internet. And my call for help was answered by an old acquaintance. Jon Cole sells beer by day, but he spends his afternoons with his family and many of his evenings podcasting. Well, we did that party store polka, and the show is now in your ears thanks to Jon's help. That was one reason I wanted to bring Jon on as a guest. The larger reason is that he dropped off his firstborn at college this fall, and I had to know what that was like. As you can imagine, though, we got into a hell of a lot more than that. Without further ado, take it away, other me. Hey, Jon, how the hell are you, man?
Well, I am doing swell, sir. It's 28 degrees cooler here than yesterday. How about you?
I have the exact same situation, Jon, and it's amazing. I don't want to be one of those guys that's like, oh, yeah, sweater weather. But walking out of the house for the first time today and kind of feeling that like it was warm in the sunshine, but cool in the
Mhm.
shade feeling for the first time and knowing that it might actually be sticking around for a little bit, I'm going to love it as long as it's here and then hate it as soon as winter comes around.
I mean, it was poetic, wasn't it? I mean, it was 86 degrees on the last day of summer and 58 degrees on the first day of fall.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
It's just absolutely poetic.
Well, hey,
But
man, thank you so much
I,
for joining me. I really appreciate it. You're a huge part of the reason that I'm able to put this podcast out there in the first place. And a lot of this stuff is going to be covered in, the intro that other me just went ahead and teed up for us. But I'm going to start us off with a softball question for you joining me tonight. And that is a simple one. Is there anything you wish someone had given you a heads up on before you became a parent for the first time?
well, seeing it was a complete surprise at 22 years old, um, perhaps wait a little longer. Um, no, it wasn't planned. and it was a total surprise, and it turned my life upside down, my friend. So, yeah, plan ahead would have been nice, right? Have any sense of what you were getting into, figure out how to get out of that truly selfish era of your life when you're in your late teens, early 20s before you have kids. Any of those things would have been great to hear.
Now, at that age, do you think you would have believed any of that stuff? And I mean this earnestly and honestly, because even at 35 years old, when I would get parenting advice, 35 when we were pregnant, some of it I took as just like, "Oh, you're very well meaning," and some of it I took as, "Nah, I'm just gonna do it my own way." And I now realize that all of that advice, especially if delivered from any parent, with a child that's, older than 5 years old, they've been doing it for a while, should have been listened to at least a little bit. Do you think a 22-year-old can earnestly believe parenting advice, or do you think they're just like, "I'm gonna be able to do it"?
I mean, yeah, I don't think so. I don't think that there was anything. I mean, I was so overwhelmed by the whole prospect of becoming a dad. I would be 23 when he was born. And I was so overwhelmed by that. I don't think anything sunk into my head. My mother is so tired of the phrase out of my mouth. I'm fine. Everything's fine. And I'm 41 now, Doug, and I think that that's my mantra. You've seen that meme with the dog sitting at a table drinking a coffee and everything's on fire.
Oh, yeah, the most, popular meme of all time?
Yes, that's the one. I'm pretty sure that that's my spirit animal. Everything's fine here. That was kind of my mantra when I was 23. I'll figure this out. I got myself into this. I'll get myself out of it. Leave me alone. I got this. I think you probably figured that out. It's an awful attitude. You need all the help you can get.
Yeah, but there's also a huge benefit to that because I am not unfortunately, I am the very flip of that. I am the nothing is fine, nothing is ever fine,
Mhm,
overthink, how could I be doing this better? Am I doing anything okay? And a lot most of the time, I'd say 70% of the time, I present as the parent that just looks like they know what they're doing, or if I'm out walking my daughter and the dog and like, "Oh, that guy's kinda got his stuff together," or, "I've got the kid in the backpack," where what you
mhm.
don't hear in my head is the constant, "Did we do mealtime early enough? Am I making sure that this kid is hitting their milestones? Am I doing anything well enough? How does anybody trust me to do this? I am alone on planet Earth with a child. Who gave me the keys to this kingdom?"
Yeah, I feel that. Um, you know, I was managing a bar. That was a very late night bar. I was up every night of the week, and I lived two different worlds, Doug. I mean, I was dad during the day, and I was John at night, and they were two very different people. And I lived a complete dual life, if that makes sense. I did everything I could for my son during the days and hours I was not working. And then when he was not around, I basically pretended life didn't change, that I was still 21-year-old John with no cares in the world. I don't know. Was that helpful? I don't know.
Oh, it
Detrimental?
absolutely is. Is
Maybe. I don't know. It was weird. It was like totally disconnecting yourself from the other side.
Actually, before we came downstairs to record this interview tonight, I had put on a hat. Actually, my daughter was in my arms, and she grabbed a hat of mine off the wall, and it was it's one of those cabbie caps, like an Irish style hat, and she put it on my head, and I put it on backwards, and we were looking at ourselves in the mirror, and she was laughing,
Mhm,
and a memory sprung to my mind, and I ran out into the living room where mom was, and I sat in a chair backward, so like a cool teacher, and I had that hat on, and I remember when I was in 6th grade, drawing a picture of myself, what I would look like when I was 25,
mhm.
and it was that. It was a bearded me, 'cause, I wanted to have a beard real bad, with a backwards cabbie cap, don't know why, and I was gonna have 3 kids by the age of 25. I was very wrong, and I'm kinda glad I was wrong because it would not have gone well for me. I was not equipped at the age of 25 to be able to handle much of anything. I didn't even have a dog at the time because I still hadn't really figured the world out by that age. But it's all a matter of perspective. And what I'm curious about now 41-year-old John with your son, he's now 19?
18. Yep,
He's 18.
correct.
With your son, how do you feel he would view you as a parent, if that's not too bold to ask?
Sure.
Just because you were 22 and you didn't know what the hell you were doing and you wanted some additional help, doesn't mean he ever felt that. Do you think that that's the case?
It's an interesting relationship, and I think I believe that I'm one of his best friends, and he's one of my best friends, and it's always been, I would say, almost a struggle to truly actually be a parent for him, if that makes sense.
Absolutely.
His mom and I aren't together. We lasted 14 beautiful months, and it just wasn't right. We did what we could, and we tried to bring him up in a stable home, but it just, when two people aren't happy, the kids figure it out eventually, Doug. Don't lie to yourself. They figure it out. That the whole stay together for the kids is not always the best idea. I firmly believe that. I believe you do everything you can to honor your commitments and work through whatever you can. But at the end of the day, we were not compatible people, and it didn't work. And there's a long history story there, that you and I have talked a little bit about offline. But Michael, he was born in Petoskey. We moved to Grand Rapids. His mom and I separated. He lived in a apartment with me on my days, in a house with a strange man and his mom on her days. And then I moved to Ann Arbor, and long story to get there, I took custody of him when he was 5, but I couldn't take him to Ann Arbor because I had just moved there, was living in student housing, so he spent a year in Petoskey for his kindergarten year. I finally got him moved down here to Brighton, downstate, and he started 1st grade in Brighton, and then we did 2nd grade in Howell, and then we moved when he was in between 6th and 7th grade to the other side of Howell, so we had to switch schools again. So this poor kid, has been moved and transferred and just kind of told where to go and where to be his whole life. And this is really the first summer, and now that he's off at Western, the first time he's ever been in charge of him. And I've had a lot of discussions with him about that. And, it took many, many, many years. And it was only a few years ago where I finally just sat him down and said, ask me whatever you want to know from, those years that might be a blur from being so young. And honestly, he just knows that he was taken care of, and he doesn't dig into it much more than that. So,
That's pretty incredible to hear, man. That actually makes me really, um I gravitate toward the word happy, but it's not necessarily happy. It's just that the power of a child to understand the intent of a human
sure.
being is something that I often overlook. Just because I'm not doing something particularly well doesn't mean my daughter doesn't think that I'm not trying my best. She
Yeah.
must assume positive intent,
They pick up
because
on
she's a
that.
child, right?
They pick up on it though. They know. At the end of the day, I believe that he knows that we did what we needed to do for him. His mom, myself, his stepmom, his stepdad, his grandparents, and yeah, I think that happy is a good word. He's amazingly well adjusted for all of that. Yeah, he's he's a good kid.
Yeah, it seems, from all the conversations that we'd had,
Mhm.
previous to actually sitting down tonight just to record this, it sounds like he's a wonderful person, and, hopefully I get to meet him someday. That would be pretty incredible for
I
me.
hope so, man. Yeah, he's off in the marching band at Western. We got to go see him, and he's just I truly believe he's living his best life, and I think a lot of people can look back on their college years and say, "Man, that was my best life," right?
Oh, yeah.
But his mom remarried, I remarried, and he's got 4 little brothers that are basically 9, 8, 7, and 6, between his mom and I. And so he's been kind of king of the little people for a long time, and parent number 3 in both households, and being passed back and forth. And yeah, I'm just happy he's in a space on his own.
Now, you saying you being happy that he's in a space on his own, I have to imagine that a lot watching him go to college must feel bittersweet.
Unimaginably so.
I
Yeah.
I I can't imagine letting Maxine go beyond my sphere at the moment. I can't
Sure.
imagine taking her to school. I honestly am having difficulty imagining taking her to something like, a tumbling class or something where she would just be beyond me a little bit. Not that I wanna be a helicopter parent by any
Oh,
means, but just like, that's my buddy, that's my
right?
friend, and she relies on me for so much, and I rely on her to feel blissful, like the best bliss I've ever felt in my entire life. And Michael's entire existence up until this point had still been well within your sphere, even though, there were rough patches along the way. You just said yourself, it's not that he focused on those things, he just knew he was taken care of. And I'm
Right.
sure he did a fair shake at taking care of you and helping you feel like a better human because you were his dad.
Sure.
So sending him off, what
Oh,
what 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 did that feel like? What did it feel
it
like for you,
was
and what did it feel like for your wife?
well, the bittersweet started this summer. He's lived with me since he was 5 and, lived with us, lived with my wife and I. This summer, he decided to go work at his mom and stepdad's business and, lived with them basically all summer, about 40 minutes from here. So we got kind of an early taste of him not being here. "No, sir, I don't like it." Much as the great powdered toast man, not powdered toast man, the horse guy from Ren and Stimpy, if you remember. "No, sir, I don't
You're
like it."
making the exact references that people who
Yes.
come to this podcast expect.
And, yeah, I found myself knocking on his door in the morning, trying to wake him up, and he's not here.
Mm,
It's 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 truly bittersweet.
that just broke my heart. Man, I'm so sorry. Like, I'm thrilled for you, but I'm so sorry.
And of course, this is an audio podcast, but you can see my face. So
Yeah.
bleh, there, get that out of there. Anyways, yeah, we dropped him off at school, and man, joyful. What a joyful experience. Difficult too.
Did when you dropped him off, was there any sort of comfort in seeing any, potential, not to say that he felt any of these things, but I imagine because it seems like it was just yesterday for me being dropped off at college.
Ha, yeah.
Was there sort of an elation on the face, a sort of like a raw potential and excitement that you were able to cling on to, or was it more just that like, I wish I could do this with you?
Sure. I mean, wow. To talk about go back a stage and talk about letting him out of the sphere, right? So he wanted to do karate class. I think I let him go 6 months before I was like, "Hey, I can do this class with you." And I did 3 years of karate, Doug. I got a year and a half away from a black belt.
Oh
just,
man, you
just
didn't go all the way?
just so I could go. No, I ended up having back surgery, but so
It's all
no,
right. You know what we'll do? We're
I
gonna
didn't
write
make it all the way.
we're gonna breathe this into existence.
Right.
I always wanted to do karate when I was a kid, and when you feel like doing karate again, I'll go do karate with you, and
All
I'll
right.
bring Maxine.
That's great. That sounds like an awesome idea. It's a lot of fun. Dropping him off, man. He was so nervous, so excited. Part of him being passed back and forth from all those places has been kind of this, I don't want to call it callousness, that's the wrong word. Just kind of annoyingly calm all the time. Like I would try to push his buttons to try to get a rise out of him, and you just couldn't do it because he's spent since he was 2 years old just being handed off from house to house and going with the flow. And it was honestly one of the happiest moments of dropping him off was him kind of acknowledging his nervousness and excitement and a little bit of dread. It was an interesting mix of emotions. Without getting into too much of his own personal business, Michael is, shall we say, lives an alternative lifestyle in some aspects, and Howell is not exactly the most open-minded community.
Right.
And passing him off to college, in especially at Western Michigan, in a very welcoming and diverse town for West Side of Michigan, was a very happy moment for me.
You had shared more of those personal details with me, and I don't wanna share them here on this podcast because that's Michael's story, but I will say this, your love for your son and who he is, to this day, from the moment you shared it with me, I think about it all the time, and I can cry real easy as well, and people have heard that in the show, but it just just because my experience is my experience doesn't preclude me from wanting the best for every single human being out there that has an ear for people just enjoying their lives and being allowed to be who they are. And the fact that you champion that for your son is an enormous inspiration to me always. And I have
Ah,
to imagine that bringing him to a place where he begins to author his own experience for the first time in a way that's kind of intangible to describe with college must have been a weight off the shoulders while still being extremely emotional.
it really is. I mean, it takes the I think my wife and I have always felt a very heavy burden of trying to cocoon him from his early life and from his experiences into of kind of a I don't know a blanket of security, and I think being able to go off and make this story and make his own friends and create a life for himself at college, it truly does feel like an almost like an unburdening once you, get past the raw emotions.
A large majority of what I'm trying to do with this entire season is I can't ask my dad these things about how he felt about my transitional times in life. I can't anymore. I designed the entire first season to be the vast majority of the kind of world-class wisdom that everyone on the planet knows, but the way my dad put his particular spin on it. I will say that when he dropped me off at college or when he would drop me off at camp, any time where he was not going to be around for a long time, I would tear up. And it wasn't necessarily because I was going to miss my dad, which of course I was going to, but it was more that they trusted me enough to go be in the world and have experiences away from them where I couldn't reach out to them immediately. I could not. And that meant so much. They knew that I was gonna be okay. And the all of that emotion would just ball up in me, and it would come out in the form of a few tears. And my dad would always look at me and be like, "All right, he's about to cry. Let's go." And he
Right.
didn't say it in a bad way. It was just one of those, like, he needs to feel this the way he needs to feel it right now, and I need to let him do that. So after everything was offloaded at college, he got in the car, honked the horn once, and they were gone.
Yeah, that's very similar. Absolutely. You know, it's all I could do was not hang on and not text him every day. Did you go to class? Did you get your homework done? How's marching band? How's your roommate? Are you getting along with everybody? You know, it's just kind of I don't know if you're ever a smoker, Doug. I dabbled in it when I was younger, and it is a very difficult thing to quit. And it's very similar trying to cut yourself off from being in charge of and responsible for every moment of a child's life.
Oh, that is wow. I was, and it was one of the most difficult things I ever, tried to quit, and I even, like, jumped back in a time or
In
2.
the back of your head, always, you know,
Yeah.
you see a high school student out with his dad playing catch, or you go to a restaurant, you see a family together, and it's just there. Like, oh man, I wish he was here. Watching Star Wars last night, first time I've watched. Wow, Star Wars is gonna make me cry, Doug.
Welcome to My Dad, I'm Dad, John. Feel free, man, let it
Yeah,
go, that's the idea. I can't watch Star Wars without thinking of my dad and crying.
right. So
You're in the right place.
I watched that show last night. I told you, and the preamble before we started recording that I binge watched all three Andors last night, and it's the first time I've watched the new Star Wars in 12 years without him.
Ugh. As somebody who shared that so deeply with his own father, I know how that must have felt. The extreme happiness of knowing that he may be out there still enjoying it doesn't at all curtail the sadness that he's not sitting right next to you.
Here's the flip end of that. You know, I have two younger children, and Katie, my wife, was at a work event tonight and didn't come home till the kids are bedtime. So we made dinner, and the kids are like, "Can we play a game?" I said, "No." like, can we go play with the neighbors? No. Oh man, what are we gonna do? Sit down. We're watching Star Wars.
It's dad's silly space show time.
Right? It's like, nope. I worked myself into a tizzy last night that they weren't here, so it's your turn. You're carrying the torch now. So I actually started that with Anderson, my 9-year-old, earlier this year. We're on episode 3. We watched it all but the last, mighty. I don't want to spoil it for anybody. When did that come out? In that 2000 something. Yeah, we're right before the conclusion of the Obi-Wan Anakin final scene,
Oh,
and sadly, it was 8:30, and they had to go, and they're hanging from a piece of metal, hanging over lava, and I was like, "Great time to pause." Click.
that's actually awesome. If I was gonna pause at any particular moment, knowing what I know about how those go, I'd be like, "This
Yep.
is the time. Good night."
This is
You
time.
know, like,
Good night. Catch you in the morning.
"Sorry."
Uh,
But that actually is something that I wanted to ask you about. Your other children, how are they dealing with Michael being gone? And more specifically, how have you prioritized in your life? I know you just talked
mhm,
about Star Wars and how there's gonna be some carryover in those experiences and how you try to make them unique to each of your kids.
mhm.
So, how are they feeling with him not being immediately available to them, and how do you make your experience with them as a parent unique?
Well, Anderson, the 9-year-old, is happy that he can have seconds and thirds of dinner every night now. So, that's been a positive in Anderson's life since Michael moved out. Michael doesn't eat all the food now, so that's been good. No, it's an interesting transition. The boys, of course, were very sad and cried a few times the first few nights he was gone, but we also shared him a lot the last few years. He spent time he when he started working, he was gone a lot of nights. He was gone a lot of weekends at his mom's house, and he was gone all summer. So we kind of transitioned fairly easy, and in the actual home life here with the when it comes to the other two boys, Katie and probably struggled more than they do, but they're 6 and 9. They move on with their lives pretty quickly. We did take them to go see their first home game. They got destroyed by Pitt over at Western, but we got to go watch the band and we left, and that was really cool. It's an interesting transition. It truly is the first child being unexpected and being so young and really truly being a child myself. I mean, I disappeared on my parents when I was 19. I literally ran away from Petoskey, Michigan to Raleigh, North Carolina without telling them where I was going. Um, and I just come back and had been home for maybe a year and a half and really just kind of figured out the pain and trauma I caused my parents from that time. And all of a sudden, surprise, you're a dad.
Yeah, you really wanted to hit him with a 1-2 punch, huh?
Right? And I remember calling my mom, and we had just kind of repaired our friendship, just started being a good family again. And I was like, "So, I know you wanted to be a grandma before 50, right?" uh, it was pretty fun, but that's not the point. The point is the difference. So truly, I raised Michael probably more as my buddy, my friend. I want to be the cool dad. I want to be, I want to show you all the things I liked, and I want you to like all the things that I like. And with the two new additions, Charlie and Anderson, it's really more of a parental figure. It's completely different. I mean, I think that kind of sums it up pretty well, right? Uh, I
Yeah.
was friends with Michael. I'm the younger kid's dad. It's different.
That's a really important distinction because my brother, who I haven't talked about a lot in my podcast yet, not because I didn't want to, but because he and I were so different, and I wanted to make sure that this show came largely from my perspective. And hopefully I have him on here real soon. He said he wants to come on, and I can't wait for that. It'll be wonderful. But my brother lost his best friend. He wanted my dad to be the best man at his wedding. And
Mhm.
unfortunately, dad passed away about 9 months, before he got married, and they did everything together. All of the things, all of the fishing, all of the, like, my dad and I mentally understood one another and got along in that way, and my brother and my dad physically got along and did all those things together. It didn't matter. 4:30 in the morning, we're going fishing, great,
Right.
we're gonna go do this. They speak with the same speech patterns. I have dad's voice, Brandon has dad's personality. and it's kind of this amazing weird yin and yang. I always said that it's almost like my dad split himself right down the middle and he gave half to my brother and half to me. And
Yeah,
he definitely raised me more like a dad, and Brandon, especially when he got older, more like a buddy,
right.
and there's no right or wrong there. It's just a very different experience.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, when I sent Michael off to college, it was, the doubts in my head were, did I prepare him enough? Was I hard enough on him? Did I teach him enough accountability? Was I too forgiving? Was I too nice? Was I too much of a friend? And then now with the other two, I think I regret a lot of when I'm kind of that lecturing dad, trying to get them to behave the way I want them to behave and become the people I want them to become. And I don't spend as much time with them being a friend, being a pal. It's 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 just different. It's completely and utterly different.
I I'll say this also is one thing I didn't talk about a lot with my first season of my show is my dad and I's relationship molded drastically differently over the years. There was always that through line of love and safety, and I'll be there for you and I'll help you, but our understanding of one another really ramped up when I probably hit about 14, 15 years old, and I was able to articulate myself a lot better in ways that he kind of understood. Like, the first time I could make a metaphorical connection, kind of my bread and butter, the way I go about life, it was to my dad telling him like, "Well, you're a mechanic and you do this and I do this when it comes to reading books," or something along those lines,
Sure.
and he kinda got it. But it's all like, this is staggering for me to be able to start putting into my mind because every single day I ride that balance.
Mhm.
My daughter is my best friend, really my only friend because she's the person I see every day for most of
Right.
the day, but I also have to teach her and I have to show her how to take care of herself and not hurt herself, and she's still so young yet. She's still so young, but I can already feel myself being that lecturing dad or
Oh,
being the, like, pandering dad or, like, this is a teaching moment and, like,
oh
will
man.
she maybe come to resent the way that I communicate?
Doug, I live in teaching moments. And I think some my children I have learned so quickly the gloss-eyed look back at me that I pick up and I go, okay, they've checked out of this lecture. Yeah, I got to figure out a way around that. My wife and I talk about that a lot, and it's different. I mean, she's Michael's mom, right? I mean, we've had him since he was 5. He's now 18. So we have been his parents for 13 years. So Katie's his mom, right?
Absolutely.
In all way, shape, and form. But it's still totally different. And I don't think that it's different because I'm his biological dad and she's not. I think it's the same thing. I was on the road a lot. I've been working in beer a long time, and when Michael moved in, we we had to get out of working in the bars. We both were restaurant managers, and so I started selling beer, and then I started being gone all the time, and so Katie and him really became card playing pals and puzzle making pals and video game playing pals. And yeah, it's a totally different thing. Life got a lot different. Especially when number 3 came around. I think my biggest regret of having 3 kids, Doug, was not having 5. You already have the 3-row seats, right? You already have the extra bunk beds. You to just fill 2 more in. I just didn't capitalize on the money I spent to have 3 kids when it could have been 5, and,
Right, so if you've already built the infrastructure, you might as well fill the building, is that
right,
what
and
you're
if you
saying?
have 5 kids, then all likelihood you could have 10 or 12 grandkids, and then, maybe one of them takes it rich and takes care of John for the rest of his life. So,
You wanted to build an
um,
empire.
I did, I needed an empire. Yeah, Katie said no to that right away. So that was yeah, I have baby fever to this day. She's got a friend who has, a one-year-old, and every time they come over, I'm like, "Well, can we keep them? Can we keep them? Can we just have them? Can we you wanna have another one? Like,
You're
we
gonna,
have"
like, go to the stroller and
right,
swap the baby out for a stuffed animal and hope they don't notice?
right, "We have 3 boys, we should try for a girl." And she I Yeah, the the youngest is now 6.5. The time has passed. But I would say that every year that goes by, I become less selfish. I think we're all very selfish humans. I said that earlier in the interview. When we're young, when we're in college, life becomes truly centered around ourselves for the first time, generally speaking, right? And it takes a long time to get out of that phase. And one kid didn't do it. Two kids didn't do it. I, gleefully and happily jumped in the car and ran away for days at a time. Right, the beer world. You were in that once, not on the same end I was, but there was a time where I ran sales from Detroit to Buffalo, New York, for a brewery out of Toronto, and I was gone 10 days a month. And at first, it was like, yeah, this reminds me back in the day. I had no kids, no responsibility. Everybody's gone. It's just me. But it wears on you slowly but surely, and it just becomes about the kids eventually, and about the family, and about the household, and prioritizing family and meaningful connections over career and money was difficult as well. I've been doing this a long time and still don't make much more than I did when I started, and that's on purpose. Where I used to go into places and be like, "All right, how can I build this job? How can I build this cash? How can I build my sales incentives and commission?" And this last job I walked in and I said, "This is the money I need to make to make my wife happy with me working. And this is the amount of time I'm willing to give you for that. And there's a hard cutoff there. And I'm not doing this, and I'm not doing that, and I'm not taking this trip, and I'm done every day at 3:45 so I can pick the kids up from the bus, and I'm not coming in until 9:30 so I can take them to school." So everything changes. The world gets prioritized much differently. I mean, I don't know how much I talked to you about having spinal fusion, but I had that done in 2017. I was 35 years old. And every doctor was like, "Don't do that. You're too young." And I just remember looking at my surgeon and saying, "My kids are 1 and 3 and I can't pick them up. Like, do the surgery."
What was the reason for the spinal fusion?
Oh, I had ruptured and torn discs in my lower spine, and there's no fixing it. It's just a maintaining and dealing with it at that point. And you can take shots, you can do all kinds of things, but it's a long road, a very long and painful road. Yeah, I couldn't do it, Doug. I had to be able to pick my kids up. And they said, "Well, you're too young, you're too active. The reason why we like to do these later is because people are less active later, and they're less likely to re-injure, and it'll last longer." And I said, "I don't care. I need to be able to pick my kids up."
I give you all the credit in the world for doing that.
Yeah, I'm an idiot. I went back to work 3 weeks later. They said 3 months. I don't know. I felt guilty. My bosses at the time are amazing human beings, and I remember 3 weeks after being basically laying on my back, or 2 weeks after laying on my back at home, Katie comes in the door. She goes, "Hey, your paycheck cleared from the brewery." I said, "What?" So I called them up and I was like, "Hey guys, you didn't put a stop on my paycheck." And they're like, "Yeah, I know." And I'm like, "What do you mean you know?" They're like, "We know you. Are you emailing people? Are you texting people? Are you answering our social media comments and questions? Are you sending out inventory from our distributor to our accounts?" I'm like, "Well, yeah, I'm just laying in bed all day. I'm bored." And they're like, Yeah, you can keep your paychecks, bud." Um, and I felt bad, so I went back to work sooner than I should have and did a lot of stupid things. But that's just John. I don't know if I would do that today. I'll tell you that. Gosh, we got kinda off track there, that's fine.
No, 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 all of this is good stuff. Because what you're talking about is prioritizing your family and understanding what you needed to do to be able to be present for them and
Mhm.
also pay homage to the people who were taking care of you, which was your work, and that's all in that balance.
Sure.
It's all in that balance. And I wish I could ask my dad every single day how he maintained the balance that he did, where he had a 45-minute commute to his job in the
Mhm.
house that I, grew up in later on. Not only that, his job was extremely physically demanding. Then he came back home, and the yard that my parents have is in a
Yeah,
little podunk town called Ortonville, Michigan, and it's 2.5 acres of immaculately cared for landscape. And we're
sure.
talking flowers everywhere,
Oh,
things everywhere. Not only that, on the weekends, he would go and work in the Metro Detroit area trimming trees and trimming bushes for people so he could afford vacations.
Wow.
And I would love to ask how he maintained a shred of sanity while having kids and doing all that stuff. But unfortunately, I now know there is a price to pay.
There is.
And there would be days, especially when I hit about 16, 17 years old, where I would come home from school and dad would be in the bedroom laying down.
Oh, yeah.
And he would do everything. And I mean, he would work himself to the bone 6 days a week, but he had to spend one whole day a week laying down just to recuperate from it.
Yep.
Sleep couldn't do it anymore.
And I think that's my hardest thing I deal with when I'm feeling like I need to be more buddy and more fun with the younger kids is, I get these great ideas during the day and then I get home or they get home from school and it's just so tired. Being a parent is just so tiring, Doug. It's true. They tell you when you're, pregnant and expecting goodbye to sleep, goodbye to energy. They're not wrong, man. Um,
No, no, they're not.
Honestly, we should just get Katie down here because she did that, Doug. She worked 45 minutes. She worked in Ann Arbor. She came at home at night. Her passion is our house being clean and put together. Her passion is our yard being mowed and trimmed and flowers everywhere, and it's beautiful. And she does a great job. And she does it every day. And it's a little different now. She does a little hybrid work from home. But before all that started, she did that, and then she also went to school at night and got her master's degree, and the whole time, my 2 boys are mama's kids. There's never a day that they say, "Dad, dad, dad, dad." It's mom, 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 until mom finally goes, you have a dad. He's right there. You can see him."
So what you're saying is you're married to a superhero.
I am absolutely married to a superhero, and she reminds me frequently, and I wish she didn't have to. But the truth of the matter is I'm not a perfect partner, and sometimes I need to be reminded that everything is so smooth and beautiful around here because of the work she does, and sometimes I take it for granted. And she'll be doing 30 things, and I'll be laying on the couch, playing fantasy football. Yeah, I get a reminder every now and then, and I deserve that reminder. I'll tell you
Well
that.
well, good on you for being able to acknowledge that type of stuff. It's not every
Yeah,
person on the planet that will easily be able to admit their faults. I work on that a lot where I kinda will
yeah,
have, like, a knee-jerk reaction where I'm just like, "No, I'm not wrong here. I'm
sure,
doing everything I'm supposed to do. Don't
right.
worry. I'm doing
Oh
all the
yeah,
stuff."
it takes you about 2 hours to realize, wow, I'm the idiot.
Yeah, and then you have to be able to just at the very end, and it's so cliche, but it's so true, the marriage advice that everybody tosses out there where it's like, "Don't go to bed angry."
So true.
I think that's the same thing when it comes to kids, though,
Yeah.
especially with a young kid and with a dog, and I gotta imagine with 3 kids, it's exponentially more true.
Mhm.
You have to be on the same page, and if you wanna make it
You
work,
do.
you acknowledge, and one person doing more work than the other is not atypical. I think that's actually usually the case, especially when somebody cares
Always.
so much about something, right?
Yeah.
I'm gonna do this, and I'm gonna do this, but again, that stuff will
Sure.
slowly build in the mind and slowly build in the mind, and one day it will come out and you'll get
Yep.
those reminders,
And
and
that's
at that
okay.
time
And that's
yes.
also okay. And then she feels super guilty about it. And I try to remind her, look, I'm absent-minded. I grew up with ADHD. I don't know what's going on half the time. I look around and say, everything's clean. Great. I'm gonna sit down. I don't think of why is everything clean and what can I do to help the other things. Maybe I could pack the kids' lunches tonight. you know, I try. I work on it. Katie always says that I go in the. I'm either 0 or I'm 100. Right? It's either I am flying around getting lunches packed the night before and snacks ready for school and everything in its place, or I'm literally laying down doing absolutely nothing. There's very little middle ground. That is living with John. That is how that works. But yeah, it's hard, and I tell you what, I have a best friend, Darren, and he's a stay at home dad as well, and he has 3 kids now. He has 2 girls and a little boy. We're totally different parents. I love how he handles his kids. I can't do it. Like his kids are literally like, "Now listen, you've misbehaved. Now what should you do? I'll go sit in the corner, dad." I mean, that's literally them. And that takes
Ugh.
it's amazing. And the people that have the fortitude for that, it's fabulous. I don't have it in me. I'm so proud of you and taking care of the things that you take care of. I tried, so I got furloughed during the pandemic by choice. I could either become the restaurant manager for the brewery I was working for, or take the time off. And I did 10 years of restaurant management. Doug, never again. I did my time. So I literally got furloughed on September 4th, the year of the pandemic. And, the whole school was virtual. And so I decided to stay home for the entire school year. And I thought, man, I always wanted to be a stay at home parent. I love hanging out with the kids. I love playing video games. I love being the fun dad. Like, this is going to be awesome. I made it about a week and I was ready to cry uncle. It's not for me. It's not for everybody. And I tell you, even though I don't know that it truly helped me be more helpful around the house to this day, those raw interactions and having your life interrupted so greatly and being forced to be with your spouse again 24 hours a day and your children 24 hours a day and nowhere to go and no personal time, though it started out extremely stressful and extremely difficult to the point where, I bought a TV and another Chromecast for the bedroom so either one of us could just disappear and shut a door for a while if we needed to, right? In the end, it really made this house an incredible place to live and an incredible proud thing for my wife and I to call home. And I give her almost all that credit. But I don't know, the pandemic with 3 kids like that was interesting. I know it was doubly interesting being a new dad. Yes.
I feel so much of what you're saying there. I connect to it all, and
Mhm.
I expound on it in great detail in the first season of the show where I just
You
had
did.
no
Yep.
idea what the hell I was doing. I jumped in with both feet thinking like, "Man, I'm gonna have all this. I'll be able to, like, write a book in the morning, or when she's
Yeah.
napping, I'll be able to do this stuff," and almost all of that got thrown out the window pretty much immediately. And I constantly, and I was actually just talking about this with my wife earlier, it's like every month or 2 months, a whole new thing, a whole new developmental leap occurs, and I have to be able to rise to that challenge
Right.
and try to figure that out as well. And a lot of what I'm hearing from folks, and a lot of what I'm actually proud that modern parents are doing, is admitting that selfish tendency and that desire to be like, "No, I want some time. I want some time for me. I need this time." And that's important to be able to say and speak out into the ether, because if you can't, it's a version of what makes you you,
Mhm.
right? If you cannot acknowledge that that's something that you want, then you're just gonna let it bottle up and fester, and it's going to be terrible, and it will explode out of you at some point.
It will.
And if you sometimes take too much advantage of it, but can acknowledge that that was a bad thing, that's great. So long as you can say what you desire, that I feel like gets me over the hump 98% of the time, where I'm just like, "Oh, I could really use this." And regardless
Sure.
of whether or not I do it or act on that immediately, I can say that I need that. But this is why I'm talking to you. This is why
Mhm.
I started a podcast. This is why I want to have these very important conversations with everyday parents, everyday people, because our struggles are not unique to us. So
They're
many
not.
people on the planet share these exact same things. But if you're willing to talk about it and you're willing to share and you're willing to have a meaningful conversation with somebody, for instance, you having this conversation with me, it helps me. And I've got a giant shit eating grin on my face because I feel like I just talked to somebody who understands me. And that matters more than anything, especially with my dad being absent from my life now. In this moment, anyway, right? Like,
Mhm.
when I watch Star Wars, that's gonna matter. All that stuff is gonna matter, but I hear about the love you have for your family. I hear about the love you have for your wife. I hear about the love that you have for the potential future of your eldest son, and it makes me excited and terrified and wondrous and feel magic all at the same time, because these are small moments that I deal with every day, but it's all gonna change so fast. And I'll probably still be a version of the person I am today as it all happens. And when I'm on the other side of it, when I'm saying goodbye to her at school, at college one day, if she decides to do that, or if she's moving out of the house, I hope I cry. I hope I cry big, fat, nasty, ugly tears, because I will hope at that moment that those tears, as opposed to the ones of my dad leaving me, and I trust it, I know that he trusts that I've got it. I can trust that she's got it. And I hope I can hold him back until at least I go. But it's the big inspirations that I get from these small stories that everybody just assumes, yeah, we all go through that. So why would we want to talk about it? Yeah, we do all go through it, but the way you go through it is what I want to know. And you helped me get my podcast out there in the first place. I couldn't be doing this, honestly, I couldn't be doing this in the way that I do it without your help. And why? Briefly here, before we go, why did you start with podcasting and then eventually having the network? Like, what got your ire up?
Well, that's another podcast topic probably. I have many a friend in the beer industry, as it's a fairly small community for what a big industry it is. And I had a friend named Mark. I shouldn't say I had a friend. I have a friend named Mark. He used to own a brewery, and so I became friends with him in the beer industry. I don't even remember how we got on the topic, but we had talked a little bit here and there after his brewery closed. And I'm a big fantasy football fan and a big Star Wars and comic book nerd and sci-fi nerd, and so is he. So we used to have these conversations about shows and football. And he calls me up one day and he says, "Hey, we got this podcast studio. I don't know if you heard of Podcast Detroit, but they're like a series of podcast studios around the greater Detroit area." And he says, my brewery is an unofficial sponsor of this studio. I gave them a kegerator and keep it full of beer." And they mentioned my name as a sponsor, and then they called me and they said they have a dead hour and a producer that they don't want to pay to do just nothing. So would you like an hour long? Maybe it was 2 hour. Yeah, I think it was a 2 hour show. Would you like this studio time since we're paying this lady anyways, and you can create a podcast? So we said sure and started doing football. And then, as you know, you get into the podcast world and then you start paying attention to other podcasts and you see lots and lots of people doing what you're doing. And there's a community there and there's people excited about it. And for Mark and I, really, it was just a couple hours once a week for that was just hangout time. It just happened to be live over the air, right? We're not in a bowling league. We're not in a golf club. I don't have a poker night. I podcast with my buddies. That's my social time. I don't ever really intend to make any money on this. I don't intend to make any money from anyone else. It just is something that's fun and it is my relaxation time and it feels good to help people. So fast forward to the pandemic, I'm sitting here all day every day staring at this computer and listening to people's podcasts, very similar to how I literally saw you post on Facebook because we were friends from the beer industry, not I wouldn't say friends, acquaintances in the beer industry. I'd seen your post, you'd seen mine. I don't think we've ever even met in person at this point. We suddenly realized if you wanted to put together a very nice professional podcast and get rid of all of the logo and branding and required stuff, there's lots of free software out there, but it all is watermarked, it's all limited, that you had to pay for it. And so it's about 120, $130 a month to host a basic web page, to pay for this StreamYard we're recording on right now, to use a service that one click buttons all of the RSS feeds, which are your podcast feeds at Apple, Spotify, Amazon, and so on and so on. Which, $60 a month is nothing compared to a golf league or a poker night, right? But still, splitting it with Mark, $60 a month, I felt like it was still a lot of money to pay. So I literally just started reaching out to people that were in the greater Detroit and Michigan area that were doing podcasts, say, "What are you using for your service? What are you using for that? What are you using for this? What are you using for that?" And found out everybody's paying 25, 30, 40, 50, 60, 75, $100 a month for all their stuff. And I said, "This is dumb. We should all just use one." So Mark actually had a previous online company that never really did anything that was called iLogic Media. And so we resurrected that and started this with the entire goal to just give a helping hand to those that want to get in. And it's a daunting process when you see how much stuff is out there. And we truly actually just want to help. That's it. We charge I mean, you help us, you help us pay for our fees. We call it a co-op. And I divide how much we pay between everybody that's using it. And we don't make a dime on it. We just want people to have this outlet to get going. And, we've had a couple that have left us on to bigger and better things. And that's the goal, is we give you a foot in the door, you find your own way.
For people listening that had no idea prior to this that my show was actually a part of this co-op, but that was for good reason. It was because John reached out to me just out of the goodness of his heart, realizing that I wanted to start a podcast. He had no idea what it was going to be about when I first talked to him. And sorry for the emotions that it
Right?
may have elicited at any particular time. But it's the reason that I can do this and do it the way that I wanted to do it, because I don't wanna make money either. I wanna share stories, and I want people to feel welcome to at least listen to their own stories in their own mind as a direct result of the words that I have to say. And I'm not saying my story is the most important one. As a matter of fact, your story is the most important one, whoever you are listening. It's incredible, and it's worth people knowing, and I just hoped that I could open the door for anyone who tuned in to have a conversation with somebody important to them about something that may have happened in their life, good, bad, or otherwise. And I couldn't have done it without thinking about the fact that I was draining a wallet to do it without you extending your hand of help. And the reason I wanted to talk to you for this very first episode is because not only did you extend your hand to help for the podcast world, you extended your hand as a parent, you extended your hand as a friend, and it made me feel welcome. And in a space where I don't have my dad anymore, I cherish those things and I hold it so close to my heart, and it means more than I can ever really articulate. And I'm a verbose person. And to hear people's experiences and allow them to share their experiences was my very first dream. And even though I spent my entire first season sharing my story, I thank you for sharing yours and letting me share mine.
Absolute pleasure, my friend. Just happy to give people a home to start their own journeys. I feel like a foster parent, I'm not gonna lie.
Would you like to take a moment and tell people how they can find out about iLogic?
Oh, certainly. You can go to, the letter I, logicmedia.com, and check out a bevy of shows. There's some fun stuff on there. Our services are available to literally anybody who's ever thought about doing a video podcast, audio podcast. Like I said, the more people that use the service, the cheaper it is for everyone. We don't really charge. We just want people to tell their stories, and there's some really cool stuff on there. There's a lot of sports stuff. I think everybody that listens to local sports radio thinks these guys are morons. I could do this. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, I am that guy. I host a show every Wednesday night that no one listens to for 5 years now, Doug.
Hey, it's fun though,
So,
right?
right. It's a lot of fun. And tell your story. Even if nobody listens, it's cathartic, right?
Absolutely. And that's a great note to end on. Thank you for letting me have the kind of fun that I've been able to have by, reaching your hand out and saying, hey, come and play. I really appreciate it, John. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you, Doug.
Now, I know for a fact there was a last time Dad got fishing advice in a party store. I also know for a fact that whoever gave him the advice that day remembers that experience fondly. Dad knew deep down in his bones that information exchange was essentially a primal experience worth doing right. And done right, both parties were richer for it. I've got a pocket full of knowledge jerky to chew on thanks to John. And I'm willing to bet his son is off at college rich as can be as a result of a lifetime of talking with his parents. All of them. Thank you for listening to this week's episode of My Dad, I'm Dad. New episodes come out weekly on Mondays during the season cycle. If you like what you heard today, you can follow along with us over on social media. We have a Facebook and an Instagram at MDIDpod. And hey, I'd love if you sent me an email. If you just want to say hi, if you want to be a guest on the show, if you have anything you'd like to say, or you want to share a story about my dad, please do. mdidpodcast@gmail.com. Thank you as always to Andy Bird for the use of the music in the show. And here's some Wally wisdom to round out the week. When Dad was really getting something out of what you were saying, you didn't have to guess. He'd always hit you with this little ditty. I'm picking up what you're putting down. A little bit of validation goes a long way. We'll see you next time, folks.